So, during my summer holiday, I've been reading the international bestseller Slumdog Millionaire, written by Vikas Swarup. So, to give a short summary, Slumdog Millionaire is about a so-called slumdog, as in an Indian street boy, Ram Mohammed Thomas, who goes all the way in an Indian game show called Who Wants to Be a Billionaire, and surprisingly, he becomes the first participant to ever win the 1 billion rupees. Which the crew behind the scenes think is very suspicious. So they eventually interrogate him and even end up torturing him because they think that he's been cheating, but he's actually not been cheating. He has been answering all the questions through his crazy life experiences. So you go through the book hearing his life experience told to a lawyer who will then help him win his case and get him his 1 billion rupees. So, in terms of characterization, I've chosen to only focus on the main character Ram, as he dominates the book completely with his POV at all times. In the present time of the story, you hear things from his POV, and in his flashbacks, you also hear things from his POV. And here I've got an example. It's on page 13. If only they could see me answer those questions. After my performance, they would have looked upon me with new respect. As a character, I would definitely say that Ram is a very round character, as all of his experiences shape him as a person. He experiences a lot of crazy things during the story. He experiences everything from murder, theft, rape, all sorts of stuff, even contract murderers. And that shapes him as a rugged and very courageous person. And I have an example of when he meets one of his life-changing friends, Salim. It's on page 94. I had been enjoying my exclusive stay in the isolation ward for over 2 weeks when another bed was moved into the room. A new boy had arrived, I was told, in a very bad condition. He was brought in on a stretcher in the afternoon, wearing a torn orange vest, stained and scuffed shorts, and a yellow tabiz around his neck. And that was my very first meeting with Salim Elias. So here he meets one of his closest friends in the story, which he experiences a lot of things with. And on this, in this certain example, they're on an isolation home where they think everything is nice, but the people in charge actually use these kids to get money by begging for money. So yeah, it's a pretty shady business. So as a person, I think Ram is a representative and a symbol of the normal life of a street boy in India, experiencing everything from contract murdering, as I talked about before, to theft, to rape, to everything. And I have an example on page 118 where they're at this home. They get moved by some gangsters who want to make them blind so they can sing on the street for money and then bring it back to the gangsters, which is of course very cruel. And that's just one of his experiences. But yeah, on the page 118, he says, "How about going to the police? Are you out of your mind? Haven't you learned anything since Delhi? Whatever you do, wherever you go, never go to the police, ever." So even though that's objectively the right thing to do, to go to the police, they know the consequences, and they know that the police are not going to help because of the poor conditions in the streets of India. The setting of the book is very interesting to look at, since it depicts the life of a street boy living in India. And on page 48, I have a great example of how the physical setting is explained. If you've been to Delhi by train, you must have visited Parangan. In all probability, you would arrive at the noisy and dusty Parangan railway station. You would have exited the station and almost certainly headed left towards Connaught Place, bypassing the crowded market with the cut-price guest houses and cheap prostitutes for tourists. And this example explains very well how the physical setting is and how it's dusty and noisy, and how there's a lot of prostitutes. As well as describing the physical setting, the writer of the book, Vikas Swarup, also does a great job of describing the social setting, but he does it in a more indirect way. He does it by describing the huge contrasts of the society of India with the slumdogs and the rich people. And I have a quote from the book that summarizes that pretty well. Ram says, "The rich people, those who live in their marble and granite 4-bedroom flats, they enjoy. The slum people who live in squalid, tattered huts, they suffer. And we who reside in the overcrowded chawls, we simply live." So I think this is a great explanation of the social hierarchy in the book, and also just in general in the society of India. As I've mentioned earlier, the crime is depicted in this book a lot. And I also think that the crime, first of all, describes something about the physical setting, making it dangerous, and yeah, it's frightening to go out if there's a lot of crime, but also a lot about the social setting, and how many people are actually living like thieves and just doing crimes just to survive. And on page 11, I have an example that describes this pretty well. Arrests in Dawari are as common as pickpockets on the local train. Not a day goes by without some hapless resident being taken away to the police station. There are some who have to be physically dragged off by the constables, screaming and kicking all the while. And there are those who could go quietly, who expect, perhaps even wait for the police. For them, the arrival of the jeep with the flashing red light is actually a relief. The composition of the book Slumdog Millionaire is very interesting, as it's very untraditional. So the book is built on the game show Who Wants to Be a Billionaire, which Ram rewatches with his lawyer Smita in the present time of the book. But before answering every question, he always goes back and gives us a flashback as a reader, and tells us his crazy stories. And this crazy story then leads on to him being able to answer the question in the game show. So there's always a flashback, and then there's a flash forward to the present time, where he watches the show again with his lawyer Smita. And I have an example of on page 66 where this happens. But your father is alive. He is in Daredom. I cry. No, that was a lie. He begins sobbing again. Now I can tell you the truth. Timothy Francis may have been your father, but he was my dad. Smita has a sad expression on her face. So here we go from his flashback on when he lived with a pastor named Timothy, to flashing forward when he had just told Smita his story. And then afterwards they watch the game show where he gets the question right. I think the theme of the book is life experience and how it shapes you as a person. Because in the book, the Slumdog Ram, he's not exactly clever on math, or he doesn't know who the president of the United States is, but he knows a lot about himself, and he knows a lot about his life because of his life experiences. And that's what shapes him as a person. So I also think that the message is like, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, because a lot of people can be very deceiving, because they may seem like slumdogs or seem like they're dumb, but because they have a lot of life experiences, they're very clever on life, and they can figure a lot of stuff out even though they don't know basic math or who the president is.